Welcome to the spring conference of the immigration section of the Maryland State Bar Association. Before I get into the more elaborate and formal introductions to kick us off this morning, I just wanted to say we have a couple of small changes to the schedule. There's right now, if you look at panel 4 and 5, there's a 15-minute break. We are going to do away with that break. Feel free to go off camera, stretch your legs, get yourself a cup of coffee. If need be, but we wanted to give a full 45 minutes to each panel, and then panel 6 will be shortened, so we will actually be done by 4 p.m. instead of 4:30. So every panel is 45 minutes long. Our panelists will be speaking for 30 minutes or 35 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes-ish for Q&A. I'm sure that we've got a lot of questions on these topics. I want to say I'm so excited about this program. When I suggested this Afghan refugee crisis program to the members of the MSBA, the immigration section, they welcomed it with open arms. And I have to, disclaimer, I am from Afghanistan. I was born there, so I have skin in this game. And we originally thought this was going to be a half-day program and it would be done by noon. And the more we talked about it, the more we realized that this could really encompass several days, if not just a full day. And then we were able to get some of the greatest immigration attorneys who practice in this area in the country. And then we really knew we had to make this a full day affair. And thank you so much to the MSBA for making it super affordable for people to be able to join in this, because we feel that this is really a humanitarian issue, and we need all hands on deck. So thank you all for being here and for giving your time today to our speakers and to our attendees. We know that there is a crisis, obviously, in Afghanistan. These issues, unfortunately, though, are not only germane to Afghanistan right now. We have an influx of Ukrainian refugees who are about to arrive, so most of these topics will be helpful for them as well. And of course, there are nations across the globe and people around the world who are looking for safe haven, and America has always been a place where they could come, and the more practitioners we have that can help them, the better we'll all be. So let's all dig in and listen to our amazing panelists today. And I get the benefit of introducing the first panel. And these are people that I know and I've worked with, and I feel really fortunate in that. First, we have Mahsa Khanbabi, and Mahsa and I went to college together. So that's my claim to fame, is that she's super amazing in the area of immigration law, and I know her personally. She is the founder of Khanbabi Immigration Law and an adjunct professor at Stonehill College teaching immigration law. She represents individuals and corporate clients with business and family immigration matters. And she advises international student entrepreneurs through the MIT Sandbox, which I think is a really neat thing. Her legal advocacy and strategic use of the media has led to numerous high-impact immigration changes, which is absolutely true. We can all vouch for that. Mahsa is an elected director of the AILA Board of Governors, serves as co-chair of the AILA Afghan Response Task Force, and is a member of the AILA State Department Liaison Committee and the AILA Law Journal. And she engages in physician immigration policy work with the IMG task force. So we're really excited to have her, and she's going to give us some background information on the situation in Afghanistan. We also have Amy Doring with us today. And Amy, what did I do with your bio? There she is. And Amy is an Asylee outreach specialist at HIAS, where she runs the Asylee Outreach Project, which is a great program for anyone. I'm sure you've been in communication with her if you do asylum work. It's an initiative that connects Maryland asylees with benefits and services available to them after their asylum grant, and advocates for access to post-asylum grant information on a national scale. Prior to joining HIAS, she worked in U.S. Latin American affairs with the State Department and various D.C. think tanks that are not named. She holds a BA in International Affairs from George Washington University. And thank you so much, Amy, for being here with us today. And Amy is joined with Sarah Cady, who is the Executive Director for Refugee and Immigration Services. And she has been there since 2022. And prior to that, she was with Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services in Alexandria. And I know Amy because I worked with her through our foundation. And she was exceptionally helpful in having us set up our own foundation. So it was nice to see you again, Sarah. She speaks French. She is a licensed clinical social worker in Washington, D.C. and Virginia. And she serves as a refugee case manager, job developer, and director of programs at the local and national level. And she brings with her over 20 years of experience working with foreign-born populations. So we're very fortunate to have Amy and Sarah talking about the refugee experience from a resettlement agency's perspective. And then I have two people that I'm so fortunate to know, and unfortunately Afghanistan's loss is America's gain. Arzu, Esmati, and Hashemi. They both work for a small nonprofit that my family runs, which is called Komak. They are both newly arrived immigrants here in America. Arzu has a bachelor's degree in law and Islamic jurisprudence from Salam University in Afghanistan. She has completed a defense advocacy training and file management training. She is an expert in basically making sure that right now that everything gets done at Komak, client-facing, logistics, technological specialties. She does everything for this pretty wide-ranging facility right now. And we're so happy to have her to tell us about the women's experience in particular as a refugee. And Syed Hashemi also has a degree in law and political science from Kardan University and a diploma in business administration from Kardan University. And he also worked with a variety of agencies in Afghanistan dealing with logistics, supply chain issues, and organizational management. And they are really just incredible people. And we're happy to hear from them. And now I can be quiet and we will hear from Masa.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much, Miriam. It's wonderful to be here and to talk about this important issue. And I really appreciate the invitation. So just to get right into it, this humanitarian tragedy has created two distinct groups of people that need assistance. We have those that have not yet made it to the United States and those that are here. And their needs are quite different. Now, within the first group of those who are not here in the United States, we can break them down into further two groups. We have Afghans who are still in Afghanistan trying to leave so that they can make it to a safe third country, whether it's the US or somewhere else. And those who are already out of Afghanistan. There are millions of Afghan refugees in Iran, in Pakistan, and then pockets in other countries where there are some US citizen, US embassies that could try to potentially process their paperwork. But the significant problem is for those that are still stuck in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the Taliban have not engaged with the US and the allies as they had indicated they would in the past in terms of helping provide for safe passage for people to leave. So unlike our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, who have a friendly border that they can cross to, where there is a US embassy and a State Department and functioning services, many of the countries that Afghans could try to get to either are not very welcoming of the Afghan refugees, or there is no functioning US embassy or a system in place to be able to take them in and then help spread them into other countries that might welcome them. So there is obviously a big difference that we've all been seeing, and it's really complicated the situation. Now, for those Afghans that have made it out of Afghanistan, they will typically try to go through the UNHCR refugee process, and I think some of my colleagues might talk a little bit about that, which is a very lengthy process and can take many years. And the other means that might be available to some of them is like a special unique program that was created for Afghans called the P1 or P2 program. It was essentially carved out to try to help Afghans who were involved with the US somehow in some fashion, supported US interests, but maybe didn't qualify for some of the special visa categories that interpreters or others that directly worked for the US government would qualify for. The good news is that the P program is moving along. The State Department has been holding regular meetings and has been informing us about progress. And essentially they've created this new P program and now have to implement it and put the structure in place, hire the staff, train them, and then go out to the communities where the Afghan refugees are and try to work with them and process them to come to the US. And so the first group that the State Department is currently working with is a very large number of Afghans that made it to Albania. So there's about 300 or 400 of them there, and the State Department is processing their P paperwork. The downside about the P program is, unlike the refugee process, an Afghan can't self-apply. They need to be referred by the US agency. So it's not really going to help the significant number of people that truly need it. One other, I think, factor that's important to mention related to this group that is both out of Afghanistan and in Afghanistan is what's happening with the US State Department. As some of you might know, the State Department was essentially gutted from within during the Trump administration. They lost millions of dollars of funding, but more importantly, they lost talent. They lost institutional knowledge and career foreign service officers who chose to leave during the Trump administration. There were 300 to 400 consular officers alone that were lost. And that doesn't even include the number of people that left early on and were never replaced. And these are high-level policy folks. So the State Department is now just trying to catch up to deal with all of these issues that were neglected for many years. Now, why is that important? Because that other group of people that have maybe made it out of Afghanistan or might have a means to make it out because they do possess a passport and might want to come to the United States, for example, as an F1 student or a J1 research scholar, or maybe they can be sponsored for an H1 work visa. They are now scrambling to try to find a US embassy that can take their case. So even if, for example, you have a student who has been accepted to a master's degree program in the United States and has a passport and can make it to Pakistan or somewhere else, trying to get an embassy appointment has been incredibly difficult. But these are at least options available for some Afghans. But the vast majority are the ones who are stuck with humanitarian parole, with the hopes for a humanitarian parole, because unfortunately the Biden administration did not create a separate humanitarian or easy humanitarian parole program for Afghans like it did for Ukrainians. And so some of my colleagues later today will be talking about what are some options and how to take steps to do that. Now, the folks that were brought to the United States were about 75,000 Afghans who were evacuated to the United States. They were technically paroled into the US under humanitarian considerations. They are not technically refugees, and the distinction is important, and I think maybe some of my colleagues will talk a little bit about that. But the key to know is, right, they don't get permanent residence. Parole is only good for 2 years, and then they can continue to renew it as long as they can demonstrate the humanitarian considerations still exist. But these 75,000 Afghans that were fortunate to be brought here and paroled were initially brought to 8 military bases. I had the immense opportunity to go to 5 of these military bases along with my colleague Spojmi Nasiri, who's going to be speaking later today. And it was incredible to see the setup for the Afghan guests that were housed there. It was a really distinct and unique collaboration between Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, and obviously the US military in setting up what were essentially mini towns. There was temporary housing, incredible medical facilities, some limited educational opportunities for young people and for adults, and most importantly, legal orientations. So AILA and several other organizations were able to go into the military bases and put on mini legal orientations so that we could try to educate our Afghan guests regarding what their status is right now, What are their, what are the things that they need to take care of down the line, not only in terms of, their immigration status, but how to, the biggest question was how to help bring their family members to the US. So the needs of the Afghans that are here in the US can also be broken down into two categories. The first is obviously the help in getting resettled. And that's something that falls upon the shoulders of our brothers and sisters at nonprofit organizations that were also gutted during the Trump administration and lost significant funding. And their job is to help the Afghans get resettled by finding housing, by getting schooling for their children, finding jobs, getting acclimated to our banking system, driver's licenses. But the most tremendous need that I think many of you are going to be wanting to learn about today is what are their legal needs? So obviously it's an incredibly complex situation because one, you have individuals here on a temporary status, and two, our immigration laws are incredibly limited. The administration has not taken, let's say, a very open approach in terms of creating any special visa categories, but part of it is because it's all held up in Congress. With the Republican Party, unless they get involved and sign on to an Afghan Adjustment Act, these 75,000 plus Afghans that came in will each individually have to apply for some sort of immigration benefit, for a green card, for a temporary visa. And the panelists later today are going to, talk about that background. Is it an asylum case? Do they qualify for the special immigrant visa, which is the SIV category typically used by interpreters? Do they have family members here that could potentially sponsor them? Could they potentially be sponsored by an employer? And then these 75,000 that are already here, as I mentioned before, have significant concerns about their family overseas. How can we bring them here to the United States? Are there any reunification efforts? And the administration has indicated that they are trying to reunite immediate family members, which typically is going to include just spouse and children under 21. So their children over 21, their parents, their brothers, their sisters. There is no, at this point, intent to try to create a family reunification route for them, but there is for the spouses and children. So I don't want to take too much time because I think I need to leave some room for my very dear colleagues who are going to talk a little bit more about some of their experiences. But I think this background information will help set up what you can expect for later in the day for the other panelists to talk about. How can each of you get equipped with the information to be able to carry out the cases for the significant need for those that are here and those that are trying to bring their family members over. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Masa, for that really, I mean, for someone who actually has some sort of idea of what's happening, a really helpful background information to set up the day. And now we're going to hear from Amy Doring and Sarah Cady.
Do you want me to go first, Amy?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there
I
you go.
wasn't able to
Amy.
unmute myself.
Why don't you take it, Amy?
Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm also disabled from screen sharing.
You should be able to share now.
Okay. All right. All right, so hi everyone. As Miriam had said, I'm the Asylee Outreach Specialist at HIAS headquarters in Silver Spring, where I run an initiative called the Asylee Outreach Project. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with HIAS, we are a global Jewish humanitarian and refugee resettlement NGO that provides aid and protection to refugees and migrants, both within the United States as well as internationally, as you can see in my background. Now, the Asylee Outreach Project, specifically at HIAS, is a statewide initiative that works directly with Maryland Asylees and T visa holders in order to connect them with the benefits and services that they become eligible for following their asylum or T visa grant. Now that since HIAS is not a resettlement agency in Maryland, we do this by referring externally to local resettlement agencies as well as local departments of social services. So on top of that, we also help asylees navigate additional resources in the state and provide them with critical post-asylum grant information. So we really work at the very sort of tail end of the asylum process that not that many people know exists. Now, our program got started in 2018 through a grant from the Maryland Office for Refugees and Asylees after the office noticed a declining number of asylees accessing refugee benefits in the state. So the response to this was to create the Asylee Outreach Project, and our program actually remains today one of only 2 such projects nationwide, believe it or not. And in order to reach asylees, what we do is we conduct outreach in Maryland to both nonprofit and private bar legal service providers, community groups, government stakeholders, all to work towards increasing awareness of asylees' benefits eligibility. And since the inception of the program, we have aided nearly 300 asylees to get connected to the resettlement benefits that they're eligible for. And as of this year, we are also active in a national scope, working to increase access to post-asylum grant information by holding nationwide orientations and promoting accessible information via our dedicated website, asyleeoutreach.org. So really my role today on this panel will be to focus on how to help asylees in the state, information which applies to both Afghan and non-Afghan asylees. But I'm especially excited to be speaking in the context of an Afghan-related conference because we are expecting the number of Afghan asylees to potentially increase later this year as Afghan asylum cases continue to be processed. And of course, here in Maryland, we already see a steady stream of Central American, West African, and Ethiopian asylees primarily who would also benefit from this information. Now, as a background on benefits for asylees, like refugees, asylees are eligible for U.S. Office of Refugee Resettlement funded benefits and services that are offered through their local resettlement agency following their asylum grant. Now, these benefits can include quite a variety of things, but typically free refugee health screenings for up to 3 months after an asylum grant. This can also include refugee cash assistance and medical insurance for up to 8 or 12 months after an asylum grant, depending on when the asylum grant was received, was carried out. And then lastly, asylees are also able to access refugee support services for up to 5 years, which include things like free English classes, employment support services, and job training programs, as well as case management. Now, something that I really want to emphasize here is that eligibility for these benefits and services is highly time sensitive. So they're only available to an asylee for that certain limited amount of months right after their asylum grant. So really the second that they get approved for asylum, the clock starts ticking on these benefits. So it is really critical that asylees are connected with this help as soon as possible. And for your awareness, derivative asylees and T visa holders are also eligible for these benefits. So the asylee benefits and services offered by resettlement agencies are available. But the challenge that we face in our work, and really the reason why our program exists in the first place, is that though asylees are eligible for refugee benefits, fewer than 20% of asylees actually access them. Fewer than 20%. That is a really, really low number. So there lies the problem, and there's a few reasons for this. One being that asylees are sometimes hesitant to access benefits, falsely thinking it will affect their immigration status or their ability to adjust status in the future. And oftentimes this is a result of misinformation still swirling around surrounding public charge. Additionally, we often see that asylee clients are living in mixed status families, and they may be hesitant to access benefits if it requires, providing information involving a non-asylee family member. But the even sort of larger overarching reason that we run into by far the most is a complete lack of information on asylee benefits. That is, many asylees are never told by anyone that these benefits exist, let alone that they're eligible for them. And a large part of that in Maryland is that receiving information about asylee benefits often depends on how a person receives asylum. So if a person receives asylum through an asylum office, the asylee does receive information on benefits via an orientation offered by the asylum office. However, for those receiving asylum through the immigration courts, this really looks quite different. They're not provided with any of this information. So unfortunately, it is likely that an asylee client you may work with has no idea of the availability of these asylee benefits, let alone additional post-asylum grant information like additional documents they may need to obtain afterwards. So what often ends up happening, and the reason why we try to do so much outreach to legal service providers, is that if the asylee doesn't receive any information on benefits with their asylum grant, often their attorneys or their representatives are sort of the last chance for them to find out about the availability of these. So how can you help asylees now and going forward? Well, as I said earlier, if you are working with a client who receives asylum, first, of course, please inform them of the existence of these benefits and assure them that accessing these would not affect their present or future status. And for Maryland asylees, please reach out to us or have the client reach out to us so we can work with them directly on getting them enrolled in their local resettlement agency in Maryland, as well as ensuring that they have that additional post-asylum grant information that they need, such as how to update their social security card, how to obtain an I-94, what their rights and responsibilities are, etc. Now, as for resources for asylees, as I mentioned earlier, we hold national asylee benefits orientations every other month, which are open nationwide to asylees, attorneys, and any others interested. Our next one is actually on May 19th, and we essentially provide an overview of post-asylum grant information. Other than that, for additional information, you can always visit our website, asyleeoutreach.org. We have a whole post-asylum grant guide, both for asylees and for attorneys up there. And our contact information is also on the screen if you ever need to reach out. But I'm also happy to take questions during this panel as well. And with that, thank you for listening, and I will either take questions or hand it off to the next panelist.
Thank you, Amy and Masa and Miriam, for having me. My name is Cady. I'm the Executive Director of the Refugee and Immigrant Services Department at Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area. LSSNCA has been providing support to refugees and immigrants on their journey for over 100 years. And we have helped 4,000 Afghan allies in the 5 offices that I oversee since last July. And so we have resettled both SIVs and Afghan humanitarian parolees. And we are tasked with providing the initial core services that Masa had referenced. So we do airport reception, we identify permanent housing, we do full home setups, we register children for school, we make sure that urgent medical needs are met, we identify mental health concerns, we apply for public benefits, help people get their work permits and social security cards. And interestingly, we started serving many independent departures in August prior to the APA. The APA program is the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program funded by the State Department. We actually started serving humanitarian parolees prior to that program being really official. And prior to Afghan humanitarian parolees being eligible for any benefits. So when Kabul fell and people first started arriving, parolees arrived at our door in frankly bad circumstances, without access to medication. Many had stood outside the Kabul airport for days. And so we're extremely proud that we were able to meet those needs. And then when they became eligible for ORR funded benefits, we've been able to serve them in employment programs, long-term integration programs, programs that focus on vocational training for women. And so we continue to serve large number of clients. And I'm especially grateful for Miriam inviting me here today because our biggest challenge right now is what Masa had said, is the there's no permanent path to residency for thousands of our clients. So what we are doing is, and we just finalized our first contracts to provide pro se asylum workshops with several attorneys who worked on the military bases. But as you can imagine, it is a huge undertaking because we have thousands of clients that need to apply for asylum. And then other hundreds that have their special immigrant visa pending. And so we are trying to divide up the groups and to figure out if we want to finish the SIVs for those that have SIV pending and who really needs to apply for asylum. So it's a huge undertaking and it's causing a lot of anxiety in the community. But we are moving forward, assuming that the Afghan Adjustment Act will not pass. We are hopeful that it does, and we are doing advocacy. And our LIRS is our headquarters. They are doing lots of advocacy. But in the interim, I've asked my staff to move forward with an all hands on deck approach to make sure that we know the immigration status of every one of our clients, if they have SIV pending, and if they plan to apply for asylum, we are going to help facilitate that. And so also what Masa mentioned, deep anxiety in the community about family reunification. And then our other big task is addressing ongoing mental health concerns. But it's been deeply humbling work, and the work will continue to make sure that we have permanent residency for the thousands of Afghans that we're supporting. And then also the challenge in Northern Virginia, as you're aware, is the exorbitant cost of housing. So we're shifting from the initial case management focus to long-term integration and employment that will sustain housing for years to come. So I'm happy to take questions as well at the end.
Thank you both. And now I am pleased to introduce Arzu and Syed.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Arzu Esmati, a recent immigrant from Afghanistan. And actually, first of all, I want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my personal experience, of being evacuated to United States. And to share my experience, I want to divide my evacuation into 3 phases, from Kabul to Qatar and the military bases and resettlement process. You may all have heard and watched in the news that it was very challenging and it was very difficult to enter to the airport. It almost caused the deaths of ourselves and our children. As you saw, that there was a suicide bombing attack outside of the airport, and 200 people have been killed, and many people separated from their families, from minors and children. So it was very difficult. We were in the lines, the people were pushing the kids, and the situation was very insecure. But thank God we got a chance to enter to the airport. And we were in the airport for 2 nights. You know, the day was very warm and the night was very cold. So even the sun burned our faces. But then we have been evacuated to the Qatar. Unfortunately, I never forget that we have been waiting to be processed in Qatar for 4 nights and days in a very inappropriate place to put the kids to sleep. And then we evacuated to the military bases. Military bases for new immigrants were with many challenges and a lot of miscoordination between departments and agencies, unfortunately. And there was also some issues with the food, with the clothing, and the clothing, and the places to sleep, because the military bases are not designed for the kids and for the children. So we were in the camp for 1.5 months, and then we start the process of our settlement start. Actually, I want to focus more in this part because this is the main part that may help. I think the Ukrainian people, immigrants, to settle and manage, to manage and settle in United States. So. And the first challenge that immigrants will face is finding house. And because they don't have any background here, they don't have any credit score and money to rent the house. And also, you know, most of the new immigrants, they don't speak English. And they haven't been out of their villages, even to other cities in Afghanistan. So for them to find their way in US, it is a huge challenge, and there should be an organized plan to help them and integrate them to the US society and environment. So and also there is some other challenges like adjustment to the new life and learning the language, and also suffering from culture shock and especially finding a job. So I know a lot of new immigrants that they are facing these challenges, and actually we suffer from this, but I were lucky to get a chance to work with Mariam, and she helped me a lot. And Sarah, we meet both of you. Thank you so much for helping and for giving this chance to us as a new refugees, because we are really, all the women in Afghanistan, really eager to work, to be active in this society, to be part of this society. And we really need more support and chance to be given for us. And actually, there is a lot to share, but I want to stop here and thank you so much for your listening. If you have any questions, just I'll answer to them.
Your turn. Hashemi Saab, it's your turn.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much, Mariam, John, and everyone for giving this opportunity. So what I'm going to tell you is from a human being perspective, and also my personal observation and
Your sound, Hashemi Saab. We lost your sound.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I will start from, as Arzu John explained and highlighted the problems and challenges of people in Afghanistan and their journey to the United States. First of all, the people in Afghanistan, particularly in the people in Kabul city, they were not expecting fall of Kabul and the Taliban control very quickly as it happened. And soon after that, people were rushing towards the Kabul airport to get inside, and after that, they can be evacuated to another country. So it was a journey full of risk, but full of hopes also. So people were trying to go to the airport site and manage a way to enter to the airport. And also, as it was mentioned, they spend several nights and day inside of the airport, waiting for the planes to be ready and take them to another country. So the next destination was either to Gulf city like Abu Dhabi and other countries or Qatar. So inside of the military bases in Qatar, also uh, there was setups like providing meals and accommodation and medical assistance and medical facilities for the refugees and evacuees. So the next destination was to getting ready to the final destination, like to the United States. So upon arriving to the United States, we were uh, uh, transported to one of military bases. So inside of the military facility, uh, there was living inside of a military base. There was some advantages and also some challenges inside of it. So inside, food, accommodation, medical assistance, supply were available for everyone, and also other services like administrative process, screening, vaccination were also performing during stay inside of military bases. And beside of those advantages, there were some challenges also inside of the military bases, like unknown status of staying and lack of information for the refugees to tell them how long they will stay inside of military bases and when they are planned to go and go to the final destination. Just for knowing this status, people were staying in long lines for several hours only to speak with the consular regarding the status of their cases. And beside of that, upon successfully completion of administrative process applying for work permit and social security, people were trying to go outside of the military bases because staying long inside of military bases with uh, kids especially, it was too hard, but still those agencies inside of the base were insisting to stay for longer time, and they were not happy with people to leave the bases independently. Uh, and another challenge inside of the military base was those translators, because I met several translators that they were not uh, delivered the real speech of the refugees to those agencies. They were misleading and misinterpreting during the need, and they were not technically hired. Most of them were hired that they were not even able to talk in Farsi or in Pashto. Technically, they were supposed to speak English, Pashto, and Dari, but for some reason, they were hired that they were not able to be trilingual. Either they were speaking Pashto or they were speaking Dari, and most of the time they were not able to get what the people saying and to transfer that to the foreigners. So that was another challenges, while people were complaining about the behavior of those translators and interpreters inside of the base, but nobody was there to hear the voice. Anyway, so the next step was departure from the camps, either scheduled or independently, and and the next was arriving to destination, airport pickup, transportation to hotels or pre-arranged house apartments, financial assistance, applying for benefits, children, school enrollment, English classes enrollment, finding jobs, and cultural orientation for those families. And these services are coming under the resettlement agency's responsibilities. And they were trying, and they are trying their best to serve new arrival as much as they can, using and utilizing their all resources. But there are still some challenges that new arrival are facing currently. And I can highlight some of those challenges that they have just for your knowledge and understanding. It's also my personal perspective and observation. First of all, the caseworkers, lack of time to reach families on time. With many refugees arrival to the United States, those caseworkers are now working with multiple families at once. Families still more have lost contact with overwhelmed resettlement agency caseworkers who are meant to help them with job research and further aid. And I assume this is a result of cutbacks in staffing that agencies made after Trump's administration reduced refugees' admission to the United States. And another challenge is leasing house and apartment, staying longer than usual in hotels because caseworkers are busy and they're not responsive to each family with finding a proper house or apartment on time. From the other hand, house owners are not willing to sign lease agreement with new refugees who left the bases independently, and they're asking for a co-signer to sign on the agreement also. Resettlement agencies are mostly providing like 90-day financial assistance to pay the rent. Soon after that, new arrival are responsible for the monthly pay of their houses. Some of those new arrivals are not able to speak English and facing obstacles with finding job easily, while they need to pay the monthly rent without any income as soon as their financial assistance is completing. Also, it's worth to mention another challenge, which is not providing work authorization and social security cards on time to the new arrivals to find work faster and get themselves ready for paying rent and other expenses. Also, I need to mention this also, the English classes enrollment. As mentioned, the caseworker are mostly unable to process enrollment of new arrivals in English language courses faster and quicker to support finding job later on. Some of new arrival refugees or parolees offered only online English courses. Pandemic precautions that has made difficult for them to develop enough language proficiency to interview for a job. So basically, these are all the highlighted challenges that I want to share with you. So those can be observed in the next stage of new arrival, either from Afghanistan or from Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We had a couple of questions in the chat box that Sarah and Masa were answered, but I'd like to just read them out in case some people haven't seen the chat box. One person asked, Barbara asked, will any speakers address what, if any, supports are available for people during the long wait time for action on asylum applications? And I don't know if Masa or Amy has any information on what, if anything, is available for people within that time frame from application to decision.
I can speak a little bit about that. So unfortunately, the answer is that it's very limited, as you might expect. Since they're not eligible for Asylee benefits or like the federal public benefits programs, it often depends on their state or county of location. Here in like the DC and Montgomery area, there is some help. For example, there's a medical insurance program in Montgomery County called Montgomery Cares, or DC Healthcare Alliance, where asylum seekers would potentially be eligible for. But again, it really depends on their location. And other than that, just, different nonprofits like Asylum Works, for example, working specifically with asylum seekers. So unfortunately, the answer is that it's very limited.
I'll just
you,
briefly mention, I'll just mention here, I put it in the chat box too, but the long wait times are not related to agency processing times. USCIS is expediting all Afghan cases across the board, whether it's someone who applied for asylum 3 years ago who was here in the US, or someone is applying for a family petition, or someone is applying for citizenship. Every single Afghan case is being expedited by USCIS. But related to the wait times, the problem is finding attorneys who can take on these cases to prepare the asylum application and file it. So it's a matter of resources in the community, not that the agency is taking a long time. Afghans that file an asylum case will actually have an interview in 45 days. Yeah, the problem is that, and that's why we're holding this session, right? To equip attorneys with all the information they need so that they can take on these cases, so that individuals don't have to wait and pray for an Afghan Adjustment Act that may or may not come.
Thank you very much. And I wanted, if Sarah could talk a little bit more about the housing issue, because that was a number of people had questions about financial support for the newly arrived refugees, and also housing. Where are they being placed, and how does that whole thing work?
Sure. So I would say housing is an ongoing sticking point. I think in Virginia, we've done exceptionally well, but as you can imagine, the concern for landlords is that, as Hashemi mentioned, people are trying to rent apartments that have no work history in the United States and no income. And so it's a risk for a landlord. And so what we generally do as resettlement agencies is that we guarantee rent. And then we do letters of support that say that we're going to guarantee rent for a certain period of time. And then we try to get employment as quick as possible for self-sufficiency. Maryland was more problematic because the traditional refugee renting landlords were quickly inundated. And so we did have to put families in temporary housing and hotels. We understand that is extremely problematic, especially after leaving a military base. And we are constantly trying to expand our network of landlords that are willing to rent to our populations. So if anybody has anybody that's refugee and immigrant friendly. But we were able to quickly house most of our arrivals in Virginia, which was in the thousands. And we're grateful to some large property providers that have been willing to work with us. So that's been great. What I would also just say about the financial assistance is that the initial State Department funding for the Afghan Placement and Assistance Program is limited. It's $1,225 per person. And that's a one-time grant. It's not monthly, so you can imagine if you have a family of 2, that is gone largely with their security deposit, right? So it has always been a private and public partnership where resettlement agencies are expected to raise private funds and seek outside funding sources. What I would like to say, and Hashemi, I don't want to contradict you, but I want to help allay fear in the Afghan community. There is real misconception that resettlement support ends at 90 days. That is untrue. And I need anyone who's telling you that to say that, the largest resettlement agency in this area told you it's untrue. What happens after 90 days is that refugees become enrolled in the state-funded programs. So while the initial State Department program is time and financially limited, we have resources through the state and the Office of Refugee Resettlement that will serve families long-term. So no family is at risk of eviction. We have funding to support families with the ultimate goal of self-sufficiency. And so that just has got to go out in the community. It is my biggest barrier to successful resettlement, and is that people think that we're going to cut them off at 90 days. We're not.
And
Miriam,
Sarah,
if I can just add, sorry, one point unrelated to the aspect of like helping in terms of the community wise, but in terms of how someone can help an immigration attorney, I've set up this kind of weird model where I have people in my community, just friends, non-lawyers, who each have amazing individual skills. So one of my friends, for example, is an incredible writer. And I gave her all of the documents of one of my pro bono cases. And I said, hey, can you please write my legal cover letter for me? Here's my template that I used for some of my other pro bono cases. And you just need to model it based on the facts of this client.
Yeah.
So there are lots of ways that you can almost set up this like little unique community pods where you get friends to help with different things. You could have someone come into the office and photocopy documents. You can have an intern come in and write the index out. Like there are lots of ways to kind of reuse material that's already out there to make it easy to take these cases on, because yes, each case has a lot of work involved in it, and you need the expertise of it. An immigration attorney that has experience in asylum law, but there are ways that you can bring the community in to help you. And so I would just really urge you all to reach out to your friends and your networks, and then you can just take on more cases that way.
Thank you.
Sarah, I want to raise another story behind of this on the Washington Post. It is also cited that in one cases, 4 ex-members of the Afghan military received an eviction warning saying they had 10 days to come up with $4,592 in back rent for their Prince George County apartment that they were told that resettlement agency that placed them there never paid. And in another, a family of 7 in Alexandria was informed by their resettlement agency that starting May, they were responsible for their $2,700 rent, even though neither parents has been able to find a work yet.
Yeah, I can't give you case specific details, but we are on top of that. And so if you want to connect offline, Hashemi, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I think that Sarah's really been on top of the chat box. One of the questions again that Barbara had was about community people helping to bridge the connection from federal to state programs. And Sarah suggested that you reach out to the resettlement agency in your area and ask how you can help. And I can tell you, I think that's a really great thing to do, is just asking where they need assistance. And they will be able to plug you into what it is that you can do. And it may not be necessarily legal work, although clearly they need legal help. There may be other aspects where you can be of assistance to the resettlement agencies. And I think unless there are any, I don't think I missed any questions. If anybody has any other question, otherwise we'll take our first break. Thank you all so much, Arzu and Syed, Masa, Amy, and Sarah. I appreciate your taking the time with us this morning.
Thank you.